Joining us now is Congressman Adam Smith. He is the Democratic leader of the House Armed Services Committee. He is joining us live from Seattle. Thank you for being with us, Congressman.
Well, thanks for giving me the chance.
Now, the Democratic National Convention is underway, and plenty has been said in strong speeches by political heavyweights, and not just Democrats. Even some former Republicans have spoken, urging citizens to choose Kamala Harris to put the country first. What are your big takeaways from the DNC so far?
The Democratic Party is as unified and motivated as I've ever seen it. I mean, we've united around Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. People are really excited about the ticket. And let's be honest, Donald Trump is a big part of that. Concerns about him getting back in the White House have really motivated a wide group of folks. And as you mentioned, not just Democrats, some Republicans who actually worked for Donald Trump in his first administration. And Nancy Pelosi really sort of hit upon the big thing last night. January 6th, I mean, Donald Trump attempted to overthrow an election, violently. And we're contemplating putting this person back in the White House. So that's the big takeaway. Look, there's a ton of things on foreign policy and economics that I think Democrats are better on. But at the end of the day, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are really good people who want to put the country first. Donald Trump's a narcissist who wants to tear the country down.
Yeah. And at the Democratic National Convention, we are seeing, like you said, a renewed Democratic Party led by Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, ready to take on Donald Trump. Harris is leading in the national polls, but polls have been wrong before, especially in the case of Hillary Clinton. Now, former President Bill Clinton, also warned that Democrats have already witnessed one election slip away when they thought it couldn't happen. What can the Democrats do to prevent that this time?
Well, I think that's a very worthy fear. I mean, look, polling is a very inexact science. Relying on it is a huge mistake. I mean, and also our electorate has changed. In the era of social media, more and more people are sort of casual voters. Back in the 80s and 90s, a pollster could tell you who was going to show up and vote, and it wasn't that hard. Now you've got a lot of sort of disaffected voters who may show up. How do you reach them? I think what we have to do is we have to keep working hard, take nothing for granted, number one. But number two, in addition to all of the energy and all of the concerns about Donald Trump that I just raised, we have to tell people what our vision for the country is. What our economic plan is. I think we have a better economic plan. I think Donald Trump's plan to raise tariffs and cut taxes on the rich would be devastating for working people in our country. I think our plan to actually invest in the middle class, build more housing, address the economic insecurities. I think we have a better plan, but we got to go out there and make it. I mean, I'm not at the convention, as you might notice. I've never been a huge fan of pep rallies. All right, you got to go do the work and you got to deliver the message. And I'm glad everyone's excited and enthusiastic, but I've seen that movie before where everyone starts hanging out in an echo chamber. I mean, everyone in Chicago is on the same page, and that's great. But we got to get the people who aren't in Chicago a message that Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and Bill Clinton, I think, delivered with great clarity.
Yeah. Congressman, the last election was one of the most divisive in America's recent history, as you mentioned, the January 6 riots. What is the feeling like in the run-up to these elections?
People are worried. I mean, I got to be perfectly honest about it. I mean, you've got, Donald Trump out there just yesterday again saying that the only way he can lose is if it's stolen from him. He's whipping up anger and resentment even as we speak. And it's going to take a lot of strong leadership to get through this election, no matter how it comes out, and keep moving forward. The one thing I will say, particularly for a foreign audience, the American democracy and our American government is vastly more resilient than people realize. We've got almost 250 years of history now and institutions and people who are committed to maintaining that. And even in the face of what Donald Trump did in 2020, we woke up on January 20th, we swore in Joe Biden, and we went to work. And the country has survived that. It has survived worse, and it will survive whatever comes in this election.
Yeah. Talk to us about your work and the priorities in the Armed Services Committee for this year and next year, considering the election is in November?
Yeah, two big things going on in that. One, the world is in a very precarious place. The rise of China and Russia and Iran, North Korea is threatening. We've got terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. There is a lot of conflict in the world. So how do we keep the peace and stop the conflict from spreading? The U.S. has an incredibly strong role to play in that process. But I think crucially, we have to work with other countries in the world. It's not a matter of America showing up and fixing every problem or dominating the world. We have a multipolar world. There are powers all over the place. We've got to figure out how to work with them diplomatically, yes, to deter our adversaries, but also to build broader support for the rules-based international order. And there's a ton of countries involved in that. India, huge power in the world, going to be an incredibly important player. And they're not on one team or the other. They're trying to, build their economy, deal with the challenges that India has, and also play a role in creating a peaceful world. So that's number one. Number two, we have to modernize the military. What has been learned in Ukraine and elsewhere is modern warfare has moved into a drone technology, information systems, AI-driven world, which means we have to have a Department of Defense that is nimble enough to adapt the innovative technologies that we're going to need to maintain our national security objectives.
Right. With President Biden at the helm over the past years, where we have seen, like you mentioned, the war between Russia and Ukraine, the Israel-Gaza war. Now, these conflicts would have received a very different level of support from the US if Trump had been in power. What potential impact will the presidential election have on US national security and national defense?
Well, it's already having an impact because Putin and to some extent Netanyahu seem to be waiting for Trump. Okay. Putin, it is hopeful that Trump will get elected so that US might potentially abandon Ukraine and Putin can take as much of Ukraine as he wants. So that's having an impact. And obviously, if President Trump gets elected, there's serious questions about whether or not he would continue to support Ukraine. He opposed the Ukraine aid package and held it up basically for 6 months, which had a really devastating impact on Ukraine's ability to defend itself. Now we finally passed it. Ukraine's stepping back up. They're in a better position to defend themselves, but that's worrisome. And in the Middle East, the big problem, and look, I support Israel without any question. I understand the threat that Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah and the Houthis and others present, but we have the opportunity to get to a peace deal in the Middle East with Israel and Saudi Arabia and the US, UAE, Jordan. And the thing that holds it up is the Palestinians need a future. Netanyahu imagines that he can get this deal with Saudi Arabia and the US and the others and ignore the Palestinians. He can't. Saudi Arabia is not going to go for that. The Muslim world, the Arab world, they're not going to go for that. And Trump believes that too. He was, standing back when Netanyahu had plans to annex the West Bank right before, 2020. So if Trump gets elected, I think there's considerable risk that we will never get to stability in the Middle East because he will give in to Netanyahu's worst instincts. So yes, it will have a profound impact who winds up being president.
And we saw a landmark deal last time Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited Washington. India and the US signed an agreement to share jet engine technology. What do you think is the next big thing in India-US military partnership?
I think it's growing, and I think technology sharing is the central piece of that. And I think the AUKUS deal is something that the rest of the world should see as not just about the US, the UK, and Australia, or even just about submarines. It's about precisely that concept that you just talked about, which is how can the US work with partners to better build the defenses that we need? And India can be crucial in that. I visited a couple times, visited some of the defense firms that are there. Now, we're still trying to work out within. India tends to want us to give all the technology and then walk away. It's got to be a little bit more of a balance, all right? where we share, they share, and we work together. But I can see us being able to build a lot of the military equipment that we need by working cooperatively with a lot of different nations. And certainly the world's largest democracy, one of the fastest growing economies in the world, in India, is going to be a crucial part of that.
Absolutely. Congressman, thank you very much for your time and for being with us on First Post.
Well, thank you for giving me the chance. I appreciate it.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On this today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
Start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. The first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to First Post America. I'm Aaron Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.